In Canto 3, you might remember these lines: a leisure in the labor of the worlds, a pause in the joy and anguish of the search, restored the stress of nature to God's calm. A vast unanimity ended life's debate. And it goes on in that rhythmic pattern. And this is what Sri Aurobindo calls quantitative meter. It means that each unit of weighted sound meaning constitutes a metric foot. And it's a quantity of sound that carries a meaning. And it's usually a phrase, and that phrase usually has a weighted word, morpheme, that is the marker for the foot. And each line has either 3 or 4 of those feet. So, a leisure in the labor of the worlds. That's 3 quantitative feet. A pause in the joy and anguish of the search. That's 4. Restored the stress of nature to God's calm. That's 4. A vast unanimity ended life's debate. So, ended life's debate is a good example of how all 3 of those words are necessary to each other for them to have that meaning. It's life's debate which is ended. It's the object of the verb. And when we speak, a phrase like that is naturally weighted. It can be broken down to another level of prosody. It can be analyzed in terms of iambic or dactylic or anapestic meter, but several of those standard feet make up a quantitative foot. And he's building the poem on the basis of the quantitative feet, and the standard poetic meters are secondary. So we don't ever notice them. And that's why he says if you scan Savitri according to the academic formulas for English poetry, you'll miss the rhythm of this kind of verse. Because the standard poetic feet are a secondary structure, and the primary structure is the quantitative structure. And that's typical in languages like Greek. It's not typical in English. And he said it requires an extraordinary amount of force to sustain that over many lines. Well, he's the yogi with unlimited force, and so he could sustain it over thousands and thousands of lines. But it's quite a rare thing. No other English poet has managed anything like that. And its purpose, its intention, is to bring about through the hearing of the meaning, which is carried by the rhythm, so that there's no thought involved in it, the states of consciousness that correspond to some level of the range of consciousness from which that poetry is coming. He's writing the poetry from a level of consciousness that he calls overmind, which is a comprehensive vision energy. It's not just a mental consciousness of objects, but it is an identification with the energy of the objects of consciousness. So it's a kind of continuum of vision and understanding and experience of things, which is permanent with him. And from that consciousness, all of these cantos are written from the same point of view. with the same amount of energy. So he just sees the same thing all the time, and feels and wants to convey the same thing all the time. And so there are many cantos that are almost identical, in fact. If we could value this and actually practice it even for an hour every day, it would be monumental, I think. His soul retired from all that he had done. Hushed was the futile din of human toil. Forsaken wheeled the circle of the days. In distance sank the crowded tramp of life. The silence was his sole companion left. Impassive he lived, immune from earthly hopes. So this is known as samatha, perfect equality towards any inner or outer influence and any positive or negative experience. Perfect equality. This requires a lot of energy. This is not a negative, weak, quietistic state of mind. So Sri Aurobindo puts together in his analysis of Yoga Siddhi samatha and virya. Samatha is perfect equality, and virya is hero strength. So in order to have that perfect equality to everything positive and negative, you must have a level of energy that never weakens. Now, the energy that never weakens is not vitality. That's not vital energy. It's not physical energy, and it's not mental energy. It's Shakti. It's that infinite divine energy that replaces the mind, the life, and the body as far as processing energy goes. So then he can make that statement about oxygen not being necessary. If there's some other source of energy that's sustaining you, then success and failure, anger and appreciation, I mean, what are those things? Pain and pleasure, forget it. This is yoga. So he says there are two types of siddhi that he worked on and that he prescribes. The one is samatha, shanti, sukham, hasyam. This is a peaceful, tranquil, equal, joyful state. And parallel to it, virya, shakti, daivi prakriti, and shraddha. And shraddha means faith, but it's nothing like Christian faith. This is the faith that knows because it is that thing. And so even if nobody else knows about it, like he said in the poem this morning, indifferent to doubt and belief. It's a firm reality and about which you're convinced. So, and you're convinced of it because you have its energy, its Shakti in you. And so this virya he describes as the full development of the human character. Every aspect of the human character is brought to its highest pitch, he says. That's virya. And he puts that side by side with equality, peace, happiness, sukham, hasyam, sweetness and joy, and strength and power together. So sometimes he's emphasizing one and sometimes the other, and sometimes they're blended. And so then let's look at those lines in terms of quantitative meter. His soul retired from all that he had done. You see, all that he had done, that's an important composite. If you were analyzing that in terms of traditional meter, you would say, from all that he had done. But that's not the structure that he's using. And it's a mistake for people to say that that's the basic structure, poetic structure of Savitri, because he's explained that it's not. So the structure is based upon meaning, sound units that carry the meaning, the phrase. His soul retired from all that he had done. Hushed was the futile din of human toil. Now, I would say that that's 3 feet. You could stretch it to 4, but definitely not 5. And when you get into the flow, it's much easier to say exactly what it is because you hear it. And when you hear the meaning, and there's no doubt in your mind that that's what it means, then you'll notice that the sound has been correct. You know, the sound level, the intensity of the sound has carried that meaning to your ear. And it has triggered the understanding in your mind, and there's no doubt that that's what he meant. Then if you reflect back on how that sounded, you will notice that that is the true quantitative meter. Allegory means that the poet presents content, and the mind is stimulated by that content to extract its meaning from the narrative. So allegory is defined as controlled indirectness. And so it's a technique that great poets have used throughout the ages to transmit the highest levels of personal value and purpose through a story about those values and purposes. And when it comes to mantra, then it's not just a matter of intellectually extracting the message, it actually is a transmission of the quality itself. So then the images and the story become what he sometimes refers to as living symbols. To know the reality of the symbol means to know that meaning and value in oneself, as oneself. So Savitri in the story is a goddess who descends and unites with a mortal, but our experience is that Savitri descends and unites with the mortal. And then that mortal is energized to transcend sensation and perception, to transcend intellectuality, to enter into universal overmind awareness, and to hold that universal overmind awareness in the body as energy, and to stabilize that, and to realize that that is immortality. That energy is immortality. And the body may die, but that energy doesn't.